All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pull bright lightning straight under your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we've got a useful subject today because it's something a lot of people struggle with. We're going to talk about addiction, and we're going to get brutally honest. We're going to go into what I consider two different subsets of addiction. We're going to go into two examples of it. We're going to talk about alcohol, and we're going to talk about porn addiction. And I think they are different and the same at the same time. So we'll go into both of those, and hopefully somebody gets something from this. And since it is a very sensitive medical topic, I will like to make a disclaimer. We are not doctors, and even if we are doctors, we're not your doctor.
Hmm.
So if you are struggling with this is educational, but at the same time, if you really are struggling, please get professional help. So just wanted to put that disclaimer out there that we're just giving information.
As an example, when depending on where you go through, any personal training certification is going to have a section on nutrition, but that doesn't make you a nutritionist. The
Hmm.
point of that is so that you know enough to recognize, hey, you might need to go see a doctor. You might need to go see a nutritionist. Something's going on here that's a little out of whack. And that's why it's important to know a little bit about a lot, because then you can recognize something's off here.
Well, it's
We,
kind of
we need
like
to
being the
address
first
this.
line generalist.
Mhm.
Because this person is obviously out of shape and struggling with things, and you're looking for patterns. And I actually am very open with my clients. I'm like, look, you don't have to tell me what medications you're on, but it is good for me to know, please, because
Mhm.
there are certain things that I could do in here that if you're on X medication that messes with your connective tissue, you can get really hurt. Or if I'm like wanting to up your conditioning, but you're on Adderall, you know, we might have a little bit of problems. So yeah, it's kind of like a frontline thing. But for those that have followed the channel, I'm actually really big on integrating all the health systems, and that's why I spend so much time in the educational system, basically collecting degrees because I'm trying to integrate everything together. And I really think we need a health system model where people like us, trainers, work with therapists, work with doctors, work with all of these things, and there are a lot of places that are starting to do that around, and I'm really liking the direction of some of this, but at the same time, there's a lot of woo science going on too. So, but yeah, no, we're going to talk about addiction. I do want to address comments from a couple videos ago. Jason says, "Thank you." Oh, hold on, let me get the quote right. Wow, thank you guys for going through this and in so much in-depth manner. You really made my day. You're welcome, Jason. But the reason I wanted to bring this up in the beginning of the episode is we had another comment on top of that, and you know, putting doing a Nick Fuentes episode is getting us popular. Because he says, "You're not trying hard enough to say dumb shit, Nick Moggs." And with a handle that says Flu Jew Coop 5308, I'm okay with you being a hater. Really. That's fine by me.
I don't even know what that means, but okay, sure thing, bud.
But obviously a Nick Fuentes fan. So,
That's what it seems like.
yeah.
Um, which is starting to unravel hilariously
But
recently.
but we had almost more views on that than episodes we boosted with an ad, and we got 8 new subscribers from it. So thank you very much for joining the channel, and hopefully you get more information here.
Well, so speaking of information,
Less controversial this time, though.
I I didn't know you were planning on making this contrast. I just put it out there because it was something that had been noodling around in my brain. And one of the many things that Steven Crowder said that when I was watching him that made me think, wow, that's really dumb. Why would you say that? Is I don't think sex addiction is real because, and then he drew the distinction between chemical addiction of you don't have to be strapped down in a bed because you're having violent physiological reactions to coming off of heroin.
Hmm.
I think was the example, which is true. If you are If you go through a detox of that kind where you need to be medically monitored, yeah, that is very different than what you're going to feel and how you're going to react if you're trying to cut back on something mental, which is there's a distinction there between the physiological substance addiction and the mental addiction. That doesn't mean the patterns aren't similar.
Hmm. Well, and they both have a common denominator, and that's your dopamine system, your dopaminergic system. The thing is, there is a difference between something that just stimulates that versus something that can create a physiological effect in your body as well that affects other systems. Okay, so let's start with I'm going to start with alcohol. Then we'll go to things like porn and gambling, and then we'll come back to alcohol. Okay. So one of the reasons I brought this forward to Heath was there's another layer to addiction that people don't tell you about. And this is specific to chemical substances, not the just the feel good stuff like you said, sex addiction and porn addiction and all that. Is everybody knows when you try to quit cold turkey and you're an alcoholic or you're I don't know, name your chemical that you're addicted to, uh, you're going to go through withdrawals, right? And the reason you go through those withdrawals is not just it isn't because of the dopamine drop. Yeah, you're down and you're not motivated and all of that, but that's not why you get the DTs or you're nauseous or you get the brain fog and all of those things. That's because your GABA system is thrown way out of whack. And GABA is a neurotransmitter that is inhibitory. So you have excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. So something like dopamine is excitatory. Norepinephrine, adrenaline, is excitatory. Uh, let's see, acetylcholine is excitatory. Those are all things that when they go out, they stimulate something to go. So they attach to the next neuron and make the next neuron fire and do something more. There are inhibitory neurotransmitters that come in and they hit that same nerve and if and they actually slow it down. They say, "Hey, don't do the thing." And there's always a constant 6 7 between the two. It's always how much excitatory versus how much inhibitory is coming in on that nerve. And GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Alcohol attaches to the receptors that GABA does. And so GABA comes in and there's nothing to attach to, so it just floats in the ether and gets eaten up by enzymes in your body. And eventually your body just stops making more. And so when you quit alcohol right away, you don't have that system anymore because you've already told your body don't make more because it's already taken care of. It's a good, we're good. We got something. Uh, and so that's when you quit cold turkey, there's not that inhibitory signal coming in, so everything's excitatory. So you get the shakes, your heart starts palpitating. Your nervous system is just going into overdrive, and that's where the DTs come in. That's akaphasia, right? That just like getting off benzodiazepines, right? That's where the akaphasia comes in. And if you've done it for a long time, it's really hard, and you have to go through that basically miserable time. Now, if you're just a kind of budding alcoholic and you've been doing it a little while and you quit cold turkey, that happens for about 3 days and you're over it and you can get into the sobering process. That's the first layer that everybody knows about with withdrawals. The layer nobody talks about is you can go so hard and fast for so long that you get those withdrawals because you're just not going hard enough. Uh, there was a phase about 6 or 7 years ago where I was going so hard and fast that I couldn't even drink beer without getting withdrawals because it wasn't hard enough. And that's the phase nobody tells you about. And that's when it gets really, 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 really dangerous.
This is one of our repeated gripes, if you've been listening, when we talk about mental health, is I always gripe it. On the one hand, it's good that we're we're actually talking about it. We're actually using the phrase and we're actually talking about it a little bit more in the open. However, I don't think most people mean it or they don't understand what they're saying when they talk about it because it still seems like mental health is just a buzzword and we don't actually want to have the uncomfortable conversations because I think that is a part of the mental addiction and what I wanted to use porn as an example of this is because to me that is a good specific symptom of our overall cultural addiction to comfort,
Mm,
both physical and mental comfort. And so we don't want to go outside and get uncomfortable and do the things that it takes to be physically healthy. Same thing with the buzzword of mental health. We say mental health, but what most people I think mean is I want affirmations and pats on the back
well, well,
for my fifis.
I will even make it more simple. They're saying, I want to feel good.
Hmm.
I want to feel good all the time, which is what drugs do.
Yeah.
It is until they don't. Just like I was talking about, it just keeps your system keeps adjusting and adjusting and adjusting and adjusting until you reach a point that there's no physical way you can go hard and fast enough.
So both of them. It's you're training your body to need this thing, this substance to get by, or you're training your brain to need this thing to get by. Both of them are chasing that feel good hit,
Hmm.
just in different ways. And that the importance is recognizing that fact before you get to the point you're talking about.
Hmm.
But before you
Well,
get
even
to
before that step before, it's
well, it's and this is something Martha Beck talks about when she uses specific examples from her practice of she's had some hard cases of people that have had um some of them have had serious trauma and some of them have had what you might from the outside looking in called moderate trauma, but it turned into something serious because they retreated into their own mind and created this fun house mirror hall of
hmm
mirrors in their head that they couldn't get out of, and they just made it worse and worse and worse for so long that it took a lot of work to break out of that mental cycle in the same way that you're talking about. If you don't recognize before you get to that hard point, that's just going to make the detoxing off of whatever substance you're on that much more difficult and potentially that much more dangerous.
yeah, and it's one commonality between depression and anxiety when they're very much typically co uh, diagnosed is rumination. Rumination, those thoughts that bubble up, and that's your default mode network. And what you see with a lot of addiction, and I'll stick with alcoholism, but it works with heroin and meth and all of these, is that rumination causes mental pain. And the substance creates numbness. And numbness is better than pain. Now, you're still destroying your body and you know it, but numbness is better than pain. And so if you are struggling with that, then this is where you get the professional help instead of like just trying to numb the pain. Mental pain is people downplay it. That like it's like, oh, it's just in your mind. Well, yeah, it is in your mind, but your mind's pretty freaking important.
Yeah, pretty freaking powerful.
Yeah, it's what
Yeah.
separates us from a lot of other animals, okay?
As we've talked about, other people have talked about a lot recently, is the idea that um, perception determines reality is painfully and powerfully true, that you can get in a space where an imagined memory is as real, if not more real, than something that actually objectively happened. And
Well,
your
and
brain can't
even
distinguish the truth if you let it get into that headspace.
well, and you brought up trauma earlier. Even if it's not an imagined memory, the effect of that memory could give you a panic attack that gives you a heart attack. That could kill you. It's not a little thing.
One of the examples Beck uses in her book was a Vietnam veteran who had done multiple tours in Vietnam, and he came home seemingly fine, especially compared to a lot of the other people he deployed with. And then all of a sudden, 10 years after his last tour, he starts having panic attacks
Hmm.
and he can't figure out why. And then he realizes it's always in the shower. And then he
Because it was
eventually,
raining.
that's what he thought at first. But no,
Mm.
it turned out his wife had started buying the same brand of soap that he used over there.
Oh, crap. Okay.
And that
Yeah.
smell that he hadn't smelled, that scent that he hadn't smelled in 10 years, suddenly made him start having panic attacks.
Yeah. The example Sapolsky uses in his work is a lady who has been sexually assaulted is at a party, and someone walks behind her and has a similar voice to the person who assaulted her. She doesn't know who that is. She's not even paying attention to that, but her brain registers that voice, and all of a sudden she's having heart palpitations. And it's if you're having panic attacks and you don't know the trigger, that's a miserable thing to happen.
Mm-hmm. And it is something that can easily spiral out of control.
Yeah, because then your heart starts palpating, and then you start panicking about the heart palpating, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and downward spiral till something takes over. Uh, I'm going to bring in another professional, so we're not just two ugly men shouting at the clouds. Andrew Huberman on his podcast had another fellow. I don't remember his name. Well, it'll show up on the screen, but they're talking about. So we're transitioning to just addiction, not chemically related. So we kind of went over that. So now we're going into just addiction and how it works from our own brain chemicals. Because I've got Anna Lemke up here. Is We have a baseline level of dopamine at all times. And the thing is, everybody says, "Oh, I produce more when I do the thing I like." You don't produce more. You spike what you have, and every time you use a chemical in your body, it's used. It's metabolized. And so you didn't produce more, you just spiked what you had. So on the other side of it, you come out lower. And that's why you feel horrible afterwards. And then you start looking for that spike again. And ultimately, it just keeps getting to where you have to have more and more and more and more and more. So they're going to talk a little bit about this for a second. I've got two, oops, got to share screen. I've got two timestamps I want to go into, but this one's right at the beginning of this clip.
These days, I hear a ton of really desperate stories, mostly from young guys. I've heard from maybe 4 or 5 women on this, but literally thousands of young men about porn addiction. Every time I hear about it, I feel so fortunate that I grew up in a time where, or maybe I just don't have the wiring for it. And if I did, I would be, I'm pretty open on this podcast. It's never been an issue for me. Yeah. And they're telling me that they can't stop watching porn. I get the sense that they're not enjoying this experience anymore because they're reaching out to me saying, how in the world can I quit? And what do I tell them?
I remember, and again, I don't know this study, but I remember somebody referencing many years ago when I was first getting in the field that porn addiction at the time, specifically related to video pornography, which is what it all is now, right? it was having the same impact on the brain in young men as crack cocaine. I mean, it's extremely powerful. Has a lot of other effects in that it sets up.
Okay, so what he does there, and this is why I pause it, is he talks about the other effects of it, like, you get a unrealistic expectation of sex and all of those things. But I will argue with him there. It is not exactly the same as crack cocaine, just from the things we just talked about.
Mhm.
The dopaminergic effect is the same, but not I mean, because cocaine, it actually attaches to the receptors as well. And just like I talked about with GABA, your body just metabolizes the unused dopamine that you have and you just stop making it. So crack cocaine is actually worse, but it's but it is similar, and the system that we're talking about is the same.
Yeah, I think what he's saying there is the way it lights up your brain,
Hmm.
but at least it's not quite as bad because you're not introducing a chemical that is then going to interact with the chemicals already in your body. So in that sense, it's better. But as we're saying, it's still a rut that you can get into. And as Huberman was saying, these people saying, how do I break this cycle, this addiction? They're clearly not enjoying it. I that to me, that's what jumped out is, yeah, that's I think that's a sign of a real sign of addiction, and why it's so dark is because you eventually get to a point where you don't want to do the thing you're doing, but you can't stop doing the thing you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson said once that addiction is knowing you're killing yourself, but you still do it.
Okay, and so here is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is actually you set me up and didn't realize it because I just said I wanted to talk about this and I didn't tell you why. So Hillary Lane, whose channel Second Story we played a couple weeks ago when we were talking about critical literacy, which was
Hmm.
critical theory in literacy. Amusingly, her most recent video is on the boom of what is it called? Romanticy, which is
Mm.
these chick books that are fantasy based, but they're the Harlequin romance smut. It's smut, and they even the fans of this themselves call it smut. And one of the points she made that I thought was really interesting is um
I get to hear about them all the time, by the way, because I have several female clients that read these and they talk to each other while they're working out. Yeah.
and fine, whatever, to an extent. But what she dug into is where all this came from, which is fan fiction on the internet.
Mm.
And I remember in the early days of the internet, fan fiction was a joke that, it was a literal punchline. And in the early days of where it would, you know, show up, and if you read it, you were reading it like someone watches The Room. You were doing it ironically because it was known this is all terrible crap, you know. And now it has actually become big business. There are major websites dedicated to, and I now know way more about this than I wish I did because she went down a rabbit hole of a couple of the biggest sites where this stuff is posted. And the two things that really made me go, huh. The first thing was when she started going through the innumerable categories and subcategories. And the reason I thought this was important is the way she phrased it was basically something like 80% of this um, literary pornography is consumed by women, females, girls, teenagers, even. And it has the same effect. It just happens differently because women's arousal curve is different than guys. But the thing that made me go, ooh, I think that's probably bad, and I want your opinion of is she made the point because there are so many categories and subcategories and tags that you can filter through, it becomes very easy to find exactly what you want.
Hmm.
And to
Or
me,
I will add to that statement to progress your kink further and further and further. Yeah.
and that's where she went with it was you and she brought up anecdotally articles of um teenage girls talking about this of getting into this headspace and then having to go further and further to where now it takes more and more kink to excite them, which is a problem. But I think where she didn't go that my mind went was, to me, what she was saying was, and the reason that jumped out at me is, oh, that's not a good thing, is it's the example you've brought up of the study of putting the little skull cap with the electrodes on it on you and then having you climb an actual rock face versus climbing an artificial climbing wall,
Hmm.
and how different that is, because there's no imagination, there's no unknown, there's no expectation. It at least with a guy who is looking around trying to find what he wants to, rub one out, if to put it somewhat euphemistically,
Well,
at
I
least
always say
there's
pull
some
one out, but
at least there's some work involved there. So there's some imagination. And one of the reasons I am very concerned with VR and with AI
yeah, I just wrote
image
down AI
generation,
yeah.
with AI image and video generation, well, now you're going to very soon be able to make exactly what you want. Well, then there's no reason for me to ever get out of this chair. And that's already a problem.
Hmm.
There's no reason for me to go and meet an actual human being and try and get with an actual human being, because what I can envision in my head, I can see on the screen. Or if I'm more into the literary, I can have a large language model take my inputs and generate a story for me that will do it for me and is exactly what I want. That's like playing a video game with the cheat codes on. What's the point? And what does that do to your brain?
Well, and it also so you brought up the rock wall versus the artificial wall. The other big difference there, there's two big differences there. You have the predictability. You have the like you said with the cheat code on, but you also took away the risk.
Mm,
And the reason why our brain fires up climbing trees and rock walls and stuff that are not predictable like that versus the artificial surfaces is because your brain automatically it just learns better when there's risk involved. So if you grab that branch and it was solid, your brain says, "Okay, good branch." If you know branch is solid because it's artificial, there's no stimulus, there's no reward, there's no hit. And so I'm trying to remember the exact chemicals. I'm wanting to say it's acetylcholine, but it doesn't shoot into that neuron and say, you've learned something new here. No, it was already there for you. And approaching, I'm going to tell you as a guy approaching a woman in a public space that you don't know, but you're attracted to, is a very, very, very high risk, but also high reward situation. Your AI girlfriend that you made on your computer is a little bit of reward, but there was no risk,
mhm.
zero risk with that, other than maybe your mom walks in the room. You know, so your brain doesn't learn anything from that. It doesn't get stimulated. It gets stimulated in one way, but it doesn't get completely stimulated. And we need that synergy of all the different systems coming together. We don't need just the dopamine hit, because if you just get the dopamine hit, you're going to have that crash on the other side because you started here and you popped one up, the other goes down. And then all you feel is mental pain.
The other thing that jumped out at me about that clip, which was great because this is where I wanted to go with this, is, and so the effect of porn and how accessible it is, how easy it is to get, and how much is being watched is not new when it comes to young men. Okay, when I was in grad school, I
It
was a
is
little,
easier now. It is easier
but
now.
it
Yeah.
is definitely easier now. But by now, I mean like within the last 20 years.
Mm.
Because in the early days of the internet, yeah, you could find it, but it was difficult, it was slow, it
I was
was
about to say,
whatever.
yeah, the picture would
Uh,
go.
the buffering. Yeah, exactly. But so in the 2000s, sometimes whenever I was in, so this would have been like 2006, 2007, I was in a grad school class that was kind of uh had a wide degree of disciplines in it because of the kind of class it was. So I was history. There were some sociology kids in there. There were some, you know, international studies people there, some international business people there. So it was an interesting class because, it wasn't just we're all doing, a master's in history or whatever. And I got I met up with one of my classmates at the library because she wanted help, both because she knew I did a lot of writing and was a good writer, but also she wanted a guy's perspective because what she was working on for her thesis was about pornography and its deleterious effects on young men. And because she was more of a lefty hippie, her bigger concern was, then what does that do? How does that relate to the treatment of women? Because if young men are needing more and more extreme kink because they are becoming so desensitized, then how are they going to treat young women? And
This has been a 50-50 issue. So I'm going to let you finish your statement and then I'll jump in again.
so but the point is, people have been talking about this and writing about this both academically and, popularly within the media sphere for 20 years now. um but they and just in that clip, Huberman said, I've only had a handful of women reach out to me, but I have had a few, but I've had thousands of young men reach out to me. And then the guy he's talking to said, pornography is all visual. No, it's not. That was my
Mm.
point in bringing up the fanfic and bringing up the female side of this. Is so her concern, this fellow student, and rightfully so, is how is this going to warp boys and young men to then, when they become men trying to find partners, and what is going to happen to that dynamic, again, from the sociology point of view, from the cultural point of view. And I didn't have the wherewithal at the time to think about this, of what does it do to women who consume this. But I also didn't realize at the time the difference, because again, this literary stuff is pornography. It's just women get offended when you say that, because no, it's not, it's a book. It's Some of these are pretty spicy.
Yeah,
Okay.
the right women admit it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's this is, this goes from, like, you don't see it as much anymore, which is actually something I wanted to talk about, but maybe we'll save that for later. But, like, in the 90s, any R-rated movie almost always had a sex scene in it, unless it was like an action or a horror flick, then it might not.
The horror flicks had the best ones.
They would just have, nudity. Yeah. But so in this literary
We used
medium,
to
you
call
will
it
have
Skinamax.
you will have anything from the R to the Skinamax soft core to straight up triple X hardcore stuff. And to Hillary Lane's point, she goes down the rabbit hole, it can get pretty weird. Okay.
Hmm.
And so the other thing I wanted to ask you is, I imagine it is not hard to find meta-analysis on studies done on pornography's effect on young men. Hillary Lane, in her video, she couldn't find any on women. She could only find anecdotal articles written in popular media, written in news magazine type places. She was not able to find serious large term studies on the effects of girls and young women who consume this literary pornography. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And that is circling me back to the beginning rant of, we use the word mental health as a buzzword, but we don't really mean it, because we don't want to have these uncomfortable conversations that and it is more uncomfortable to have these conversations with and about women. It's more acceptable to criticize boys and young men. And that is a problem on us, the men.
See,
And
yeah,
I,
the only thing I can find was oh, no, hold on. I might have found one. Hold on. The only thing I could find was who reads them more, men or women. It's like, okay, obviously women. Uh, but no, let me kind of take a look over this one real quick. Go ahead and keep talking while I'm looking over this.
so I've seen, and Hillary Lane's point of view was more from the female criticizing the female. So I'll leave that to her, for obvious reasons. But I don't want to go that route. To me, I want to criticize us men for getting it to this point in the first place. And I think the reason this happens is because women and children first wasn't just a slogan, wasn't just a saying, it was a cultural ethos. And you can go look up the statistics of the survivors of the Titanic. And I want to say something like 75-ish% of them were women or children.
Okay, so I just went over this, the conclusions from this. It was kind of woke.
You don't
It
say.
was basically, well, we need to go to modern romantic dynamics, and most of these have the protagonist and the antagonist, male, female, having a joyful love experience, and it should be more modern. So yeah, okay, so that's the
Wait,
only thing that
so
comes up.
so they were mad because these romantices all have happy endings and the
Yes.
the girl and the guy get together. That was actually amusingly, I've brought him up a new channel I follow. Greg Owen did a similar video about the same time Hillary Lane released hers because he went down this rabbit hole. And to him, that was the most amusing part of reading like a dozen of these books that are now bestsellers is the guy is usually the guy or guys because he said most of these have a love triangle and the guys are more traditionally masculine and
Mhm.
the girl is a more traditional strong female character but not actually a girl boss. And these are the stories that women are consuming in the millions. And yet you look at what is being produced on TV, streaming, movies, and they're still stuck in the masculinity is toxic and the girl has to be a girl boss. And then you wonder why no one shows up to watch
Let's
those.
let's go with the most famous one, 50 Shades of Grey. She was a girl boss. She was a successful uh, businesswoman, uh, making her money, living in uptown New York. I think it was New York at the time, which is expensive to live in. Basically, being a girl boss and an independent woman. And this guy comes in and dominates her. And that's the point of the whole story. And they ate, what is it? It's the best-selling romance novel ever, isn't it?
It might still be. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, it blew up the box office too.
Crying
So
out loud, Oprah was talking about it.
yeah. And that's the whole point of that story is she was successful, but she needed something more. And that's like problematic in the words of the fourth wave
Mm-hmm.
feminists, you know?
And much like, all right, so the 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 reason that this slope is so slippery and gets slipped so easily by so many
We can't be
people
talking about
is
porn and talk about slippery.
I did that on purpose. Yeah, is for the
Diddy party?
guy
What?
for the guy who is consuming, who is not taking that risk, as you say, because it is very high risk, high reward to put yourself out there, is because of toxic femininity, they would rather not take the risk because you're not just talking about getting shot down anymore. You're not just talking about getting rejected. You're talking about maybe she, snaps a picture of me or is taking video while I'm getting shot down. And all of a sudden I'm all over TikTok or Snapchat being shared around as, oh, look at this loser, or look at this creep, or look at, I mean, how
Yeah.
many times have we seen those?
Well, we'll go back to anxiety and ruminating thoughts. Some of that is overblown by TikTok and Instagram and stuff
Yep, yep.
because I'm trying, I didn't know you were going this direction, so I'm trying to remember the stats on the top of my head. I think it's like 80% of men are think they would be think that would happen if they approached a woman in a bar or club or whatever, and 80% of women wish guys would approach them more. So
It, it, it
we have a true Pareto distribution there. 80
I
80 20.
I hadn't thought about it in these terms, but I was doom scrolling while I was trying to wake up here and get my brain to wake up, and I was scrolling through
You
shorts
do know
from.
that is the opposite of waking your brain up, right?
Well, it depends on the shorts I'm going through, but this one was mostly the whatever podcast guys
Mm,
talking to chicks, and they had on a woman, an older woman there, who brought up the bear versus the man in the woods, and her words, these women are delusional.
hmm
Well, I just realized, to your point, these guys are just as delusional, but from the opposite side.
hmm
Is it that the fear of approaching a girl in public is the male version of I'd rather encounter a bear in the woods. Uh, and it is for the same reasons. It is because culturally we never pushed back on the nonsense. You know, this this older woman is making this point of, this is a wild animal. It is a predator. It will eat you ass first, as we have talked about here. It is not a good way to go. Okay. And and you think that some random guy, just pick a random guy,
Sorry, I'm
is
sorry. Random guy
is
might eat
worse
her
than
ass
that?
first too.
Yeah, but only if you ask nicely.
I couldn't help it. I'm sorry.
Yes, but
Sorry YouTube. Sorry
the
everybody.
overwhelming majority of guys will do that if you ask nicely and let them take you to dinner. He's just not going to
I need
start
to find
chowing
the
down like
meme
the
that it
bear will.
has. I need to find the meme that says, in a world where people will eat ass now, they still get mad at you for double dipping, and it's got a nacho chip in queso.
Oh, oh gosh. Anyway, but
Anyway,
the,
yes.
the
Don't get
bear
sepsis,
meme,
everybody.
came all the way back in. This started sometime in the Obama second administration. This push of, I believe the number they were throwing around, I don't remember if it was 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women on college campuses had been sexually assaulted. It was complete crap. The
That was
number
part of the
was
Me Too movement. Yeah.
that was the beginnings of the right at the beginnings of the Me Too
hmm
movement, and it was complete and total crap. But there was not enough effective pushback on it, so it became ingrained in the same way that the algorithm feeds negativity. So now you have all ingrained in the minds of young men that I'm going to end up on an Instagram reel or a Snapchat or a TikTok, and I'm going to go viral for all the wrong reasons. And it's not just the immediate reputational damage of, say, in the old days, you go up to a group of girl, you ask a girl, she wants to dance. If you can we talk? Can I buy you a drink? Whatever. And she shoots you down, and her whole gaggle of friends laughs at you. Okay, well that's bad enough that you just got laughed at by a half dozen girls while you were trying to make your move and shoot your shot. But now you go viral in the wrong way, your whole life is ruined. People
hmm
are going to find that and say, I'm sorry, the position has been filled. And they're not going to tell you it's because we found something embarrassing on social media and we don't want the potential blowback. But your life has just been ruined. Now the odds of that happening are very low, but because of that negativity bias and because it has not been pushed back on culturally, but especially it has not been pushed back by women, we need to bring shaming back. Girls out there who are now putting up videos complaining about, why did no guys ever approach me? Start calling out the toxic women who are, you know, dressing up basically in a bikini to go work out and then posting videos of, oh, check out this creeper who keeps looking at me. Stop it, honey. You're ruining it for the rest of us.
Yeah. I think we need to get back on track a little bit
Right.
with
So
yeah.
I derailed myself with the bear, but where I was going with that from the female side is if it becomes so easy to find exactly what you want by filtering through all the filters so that you can sit there all evening and you don't have to go out, you don't have to put yourself out there because you're reading these things in the same way that the guy, you know, goes to the hub and all right, now I don't need to go out because I've already taken care of business. Same thing. Well, one of the reasons is it has become so easy to get lost in that is because of the one, the warped expectations from the female side, which I'll leave to people like Hillary Lane, to the ladies. You talk to the ladies about this, but from the guy side, this is what Peterson has been harping on for a decade: is make yourself worth pursuing, make yourself worth having, young man. If you want a relationship, then make yourself worth a woman investing that time in you.
Well, you kind of danced around the answer in that is this is a cross-sex mind reading right here. Uh, from on the guy's side, it's the ease, it's the low risk, it's the I got my nut, I'm good, which they're not because it's eventually they're going to have to find they're either going to have to do more and more and more, or they're going to have to find more extreme, more extreme, more extreme.
Or they're going to have to start supplementing because
Yeah.
this doesn't make me feel good anymore because I'm still lonely. So now I'm going to sit here, with a tall boy
Hmm.
drinking while I'm on the hub. Well,
Yeah.
the tall boy's not doing it anymore. So let me pour myself a double shot,
Yeah.
you know? And,
Yeah, so from the guy side, it's the ease, it's the low risk. From the female side, you said the word, but you danced around it,
mm,
is the expectation. Because I've read smut novels because my friends that are girls were like, "Hey, what do you think about this? Because we value your opinion." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll read a book." These things get pretty extreme. Like there was one I read, I don't remember the author's name, but it's Haunting Adeline is the name of the book. And I stopped a third of the way through, gave the book back to the person that gave it to me, and I said, "You do realize he's raping her, right?" She's like, "Well, kind of, but not really." And I'm like, "He is forcing himself on her and doing things that are not consensual and actually extreme at the same time. He is raping her." And I can't read this anymore. She goes, "Oh, but he gets better." And I'm like, a relationship that starts with you raping somebody isn't that's getting better at the end. That's called Stockholm syndrome on her part. That's the only answer to it. And yeah, he was a very manly man who had a job that was very his job was actually very noble. He hunted uh, sex traffickers was what he did. And it was like, okay, yeah, but no, 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 you can't do that. And if that's what gets you going, you if you find that in real life, that guy's going to jail. And I don't think you actually want that. But you're idolizing it.
this
And
is this is the exact same conversation I was having, but from the other direction 20
mm,
years ago. Is one of the things she brought up was the, at the time, relatively new rise of um basically snuff films of graping and questionable consent and things like that. The relatively new rise, say, into the mainstream. It was always there, but it was always niche. And she had numbers, statistics, and surveys on the um the rising amount of these key search terms.
mm,
Okay, same thing, but from the young man side of it is that's a problem if that is what it takes for a normal, healthy, you know, in his sexual prime young man, if that's what it takes to get you going, that's a problem.
Hmm.
Because in your sexual prime, it shouldn't take much to get you going.
Hmm. Well, then you also see from the female side of this, we'll go back to the visual porn, is they see this too. And they get in their mind that this is what the guy wants. And they're doing things that aren't natural for them because they think that's what that the guy wants. You know, like slap me or choke me or, you know, we'll do this sexual act that involves another part of my body that isn't the one that usually is the one involved. You can imagine what that one is. And I mean, you could end up being hurt in the long run. You can all of these things play into it. The expectation, or they say things, they talk, and it's like they're yelling out things, and I'm like, no, it's just like get to know each other, be
I've
intimate with each
I've
other.
said it before. One of my super autistic favorite comedians, Matt McClowry, porn is like wrestling. None of the moves work in real life, and everyone who did it in the 80s is dead.
Hmm. And the camera work is throws you off. And if you're a young male and you're watching it, you're gonna get a these guys are like 5'2" and 120 pounds. That's a normal size thing. It just looks massive on them. Look at them next to the girl in the video. The guy is shorter than the girl, and it's not because she's tall. That I mean, it is unrealistic expectations. But we have to get back to addiction. Now we're going into the industry now. We need to get back to addiction. Okay, so addiction. What is it doing? It's giving you a dopamine spike, right? Which at the end of that, you've used up that chemical that's in your body and has a balance. And so now it is low and your body has to reproduce it. And but you don't know that because you can't see it. You're not doing a brain scan on you know with polymers on that show the chemical floating around in your brain. So you're just saying, "Oh, I feel bad now, but I felt good a second ago." And so, okay, maybe you let it level out. Maybe that got you, you took a nut and a nap, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm still feeling down, but I felt good over there. So then you do it again, and then you go further down because you're using up this chemical in your brain. It's like this is why a cold plunge works for cortisol in the morning because everybody talks about cortisol. Oh, it's so bad, it's so bad. It's a stress hormone. It gets used up when your body is handling stress. And if that's chronic stress, that's bad. But if you jump in 45-degree water, that's acute stress. And your body uses up that cortisol real quick. That's why a cold plunge in the morning actually works because you have this stress hormone that doesn't get taken care of because we don't have to fight off bears anymore. Uh, and so you get to use it up real quick and then you can go about your day. Uh, Same thing with dopamine, same thing with that GABA that I was talking about, same thing with acetylcholine, same thing with, name your neurotransmitter. It gets used up and it just gets lower and lower and lower if you don't give it time to recover. And if you keep peaking it, you use more. And so the more you peak it, the more the pain on the other end of it comes. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And so that's why these addictions, gambling's another one. That's an easy example. B.F. Skinner was an advisor to the casinos for how many times can we get somebody to pull the lever without leaving, but also without making money. And so they figured out the optimal amount of money they had to give to keep people coming in, but make them the most money. And he's like the godfather of operant conditioning, So, and that's the whole principle behind it. Porn is the same thing. Anything that feels good is the same thing.
And if you don't have the wherewithal to take a breath and take a step back from yourself and saying, hey, what's going on here? And why do I feel like this? And what am I doing? What should I be doing? You're just going to reflexively fall down that path
Hmm.
because it's so easy, because it is so immediately rewarding, and because, as in our long tangents talking about these specific examples, because our modernity has feeds it.
Hmm.
That's, the social media algorithm, the search algorithm feeds that negativity bias and is just going to make you want that sweet, sweet dopamine hit even more.
Well, let me go back to Huberman here. Uh, Oops, let me get off that. Okay, so back to Huberman here, because he's going to go into that a little bit more if I got the timestamp right.
Watching porn.
It seems like basically stopping completely is the answer. And people say, and I'm not trying to moralize here, right? I'm not telling
No.
people what's moral about this. I just know that any behavior or substance that leads to quick, repeated inflections in dopamine is going to create a groove in the nervous system where you're going to crave that thing, and it's
Yeah.
going to give you a lower and lower sense of satisfaction over time. And the only way to reset that circuit is to stop and do something else in its place, ideally that's adaptive.
These are people that are
Okay, so basically what I said there, but this is where I agree and disagree with Dr. Huberman there. And for those that aren't familiar, Huberman Labs, he's out of Stanford University, neuroscientist. So uh, very credible source, very good source for a lot of things. Very long videos typically, and but it's very informative. Uh, but this is why I wanted to separate the two, the ones that have a physical chemical component versus those that are just the dopamine hit, because that's great advice for those that are just the dopamine hit. Again, we're not giving you professional advice, but that's probably the best advice from my opinion in those situations. If you're addicted to porn, if you're addicted to gambling, if you're addicted to I'm gonna put a pin in sex because sex is so important for our mental health as well. If you're addicted to smut novels, if you're addicted to anything that doesn't involve a chemical coming in your body, that's great advice because all you have is the dopamine detox, scrolling on your Instagram, scrolling on TikTok or whatever, those kind of things. That's great advice. But this is where I will be cautious here is if it involves a physical chemical, please get help or taper. Please do not just cold the dirty truth AA doesn't tell you is how many people die going cold turkey off alcohol because it's like a 13% fatality rate from the DTs. DTs are the shakes, but your heart is a muscle too. And if your heart shakes, you're in trouble. And so get either clinical professional help where they can medicate you and help you through the process or do a taper process. I'll bring up the link here when I pass it over to you. But yeah, there is a difference between those two things. So if you're on a chemical substance, a drug, please get clinical help or do some kind of taper instead of just cold turkey like that. Unless you haven't been doing it long, then you might get away with it.
Yeah, and that's again where the uncomfortable conversation part of it comes in is um you may have to take a breath, step back, and evaluate your own life because depending on how many close friends you have and how close they are, they may not want to tell you, dude, we're concerned about this, or we think you're doing too much of that. So you may have to self-evaluate and then see, well, um, let me let me try stepping back, let me try cutting back of whatever it is and see how I feel. Because if you cut back and you feel like crap, then that's your big waving red flag of there's a problem here. And if depending on how crappy you feel, that's the clue to I need help. I need someone to help me with this.
This is a source I bring up again, no professional advice here, but this helped me. Was this program here, HAM's harm reduction for alcohol. And it's a taper program to help you reduce, reduce till eventually you can get down to either normal levels or off completely. So that's a good resource. I'll put a link in the description.
So I want to finish up with you unpacking what he meant versus what I think he meant when he said to do something else, preferably something adaptive.
Yeah, so he didn't go into it in this video, or I would have just played it more. But uh, a lot of times when people say that, a lot of things are addictive. Exercise can be addictive, but we call that adaptive addictive. So if you're addicted to exercise, I have to do it. I cannot even start my day without it or whatever. We call that adaptive. Now, I kind of argue with that because I get a little more nuance because you can over exercise.
Mhm.
But uh, here's one. People get addicted to religion. Look at how many born again Christians were addicts and look at how they act. Everything is centered around that thing because they get a dopamine hit from their activity. And so a lot of people would call that adaptive addiction. And yeah,
So speaking of something adaptive, that it what when he said that, something it reminded me of is a couple days ago, I shared a Reuters story on X and I tagged you in it saying this headline broke my poor little brain because
did you see my response?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the Reuters headline is, and some of you may have heard about this, Australia's social media ban for under 16s has raised concerns among young people about isolation, especially for marginalized groups, as the government aims to improve youth mental health. Banning you from being virtual so that you have to go out and make actual friends in person is going to increase isolation. Reuters, do you see the problem with your headline?
Yeah, I'm going to get a little historical here and remember a couple videos ago, a few videos ago, I said there is actually a structural racism that goes on. What was it?
I remember you saying that, and I'm trying to remember the context. What was it?
Indigenous people and the reservations and all of that. What do we do with indigenous people? Alcohol casinos, addictions. This article is just saying give them an addiction.
Mm,
Give them an addiction and we
keep
control them.
keep them on the virtual reservation.
Yeah, keep them on the virtual reservation. That is, I mean, if you want to get me on the structural racism bandwagon, we'll talk about American Indians, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or indigenous peoples or whatever, because that's exactly what you. I mean, I'm trying to remember who did it. Was it Lenin that said alcohol can control a population?
I don't remember.
And Russians are kind of isomorphic. Tell us. I know you don't drink, but tell us about this because aren't Russians famous for their I always say because I looked at a map one time that was average alcohol consumption and I said, I'm an American alcoholic, but I'm an average Russian. And yeah, but that's the thing. They basically introduced alcohol, fire water onto these uh reservations and then gave them, oh, you can have casinos here. By the way, we made casinos addictive, but you can have casinos here. That's the only place you can have casinos, but you can have them here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, control the population through addiction. There's a rumor that when originally the actual internet, not Al Gore's version of inventing the internet, was being created, the government was involved. And I go back to B.F. Skinner, and he was involved in how can we make this thing addictive to the population so we can control them. Now, you're getting kind of into conspiracy theory territory there, but at the same time, it happened. Doesn't matter if the government's involved, it happened. That thing in your pocket is addictive.
Hmm.
As soon as somebody will send me a reel and I hadn't been on my phone all day, and then 30 minutes later I'll be like, "Whoa, where'd the time go?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something adaptive you can do is get off the phone and get with actual human beings in a real setting rather than a virtual setting and leave the freaking phone in the car.
Hmm.
There's your adaptive alternative behavior that you can do to try and break this cycle if you're starting to go down that path of I'm sitting here staring at the idiot box for way too long.
Yeah. Which is really hard for us to say because we need you on the idiot box to listen to us. But I mean, you can put your phone somewhere out of reach and have your earbuds in and listen to us. So,
This is why I love that, channels that are big enough to do this, like Nerdrotic and Geeks and Gamers and those guys. They do meetups on like a regular basis, every month, every couple of months. They'll do a meetup, of hey, we're going to be here. And yeah, on the one hand, it's they're selling merch, it's part of their business, whatever. But on the other hand, it's great that hey, I can go to this place and I can meet up with other people who enjoy this same thing I do. And we can talk, we can hang out, shake the real hand of a real person, you know, and that's a good thing. That is where this thing that we have let become maladaptive can actually be used to be adaptive.
hmm yeah. So yeah, there's many great things about the smartphone and about the internet, but at the same time, when we're speaking in the words of addiction, it's it's really tough not to go down that road and please be sympathetic to people.
Hmm.
If you know somebody who has a substance addiction, be sympathetic, but still try to help. It's because if you intervene too hard, they're gonna go further down.
Hmm.
But just be a good friend, be a good family member, whatever, and encourage them. If they are trying to get off, don't be that person that's like, well, come party with us just one more time. That kind of it's
it, be patient because my pain management doctor gently nudged me for
mhm.
several months before I finally went, all right, yeah, you're right. I should go to a mental health specialist because how much of my chronic pain comes from chronic tension, which comes from chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
I need to
Yeah.
address this.
Oh yeah, we can go into a whole episode on that because that's my whole thesis. But and you actually kind of inspired that. I have other people that inspired that as well. But uh, I'm just going to close with it's going to sound selfish, but if you do know somebody that wants a gentle touch but wants some education on this, share them this video.
Mhm.
They can just give it a listen or not give it a listen. It's fine. Just share this video with them.
Yeah. And one of the reasons we did kind of meander is because I wanted to make the point that, you know, alcohol, uh, porn, gambling, just doom scrolling down social media. We brought up a number of different things, and maybe none of those things apply to you, but maybe something similar is going on in your life. And that's why we tried to keep it broad and use a number of different examples.
All right, that's all I have.
All right. Well, then we'll see y'all next time. Holidays coming up, so no idea when next time will be. We might end up having to take a hiatus until the beginning of next year, but we'll see what the schedules look like. And
Yeah, which sucks because we had this very low volume time too because we both had the hantavirus apparently, and it really got in the way. Plus finals and all of that. So, all right, well, we'll see you next time, and thank you for listening if you got this far.